Ethan Cole had spoken to many strange beings since joining the human diplomatic fleet, but nothing in his life had prepared him for the palace of Queen Zyra. The palace floated above the red clouds of Velkar Prime, like a sharp black crown hanging in the sky, and every person who entered it seemed to lose their voice as if the walls themselves were listening. Ethan walked behind two silent guards through a long silver hall with dark glass windows on both sides. Beyond them he could see lightning moving under the clouds below the palace, and every flash made the polished floor shine like frozen water. He had come as a translator and advisor for the peace mission between Earth and the Velkar Empire. The mission was already failing. 3 human envoys had disappeared during talks over the last 2 months, and yet the Queen had allowed one more human audience. Many people in the fleet believed it was a trap. Ethan believed it too, but he had still come because humans were tired of fear, and because someone had to learn the truth. The guard stopped before a pair of giant doors shaped like folded wings. Neither guard looked at him. One raised a hand, and the doors opened without sound. The throne room beyond was huge, so huge that Ethan felt small the moment he stepped inside. Tall pillars of dark crystal rose into the shadows above, and a cold blue fire burned in floating rings around the chamber. Hundreds of alien nobles stood in silence along the sides of the hall, all facing the throne at the far end. And on that throne sat Queen Zyra. For one long second, Ethan forgot to breathe. Then, humans had heard stories about the Queen. Stories of a monster queen who broke warlords with a stare and burned rebels alive with her own hands. They had expected claws, fangs, perhaps scales, perhaps a face too ugly to describe. Instead, he saw beauty. Her skin shone like moonlight on metal. Her black hair flowed over one shoulder like liquid shadow, and her eyes glowed with a soft silver light. Her face was calm, perfect, almost unreal, and the jewels woven into her dark robes looked dull beside her. It was so strange that Ethan felt his mind pull in 2 directions at once. One part warning him of danger, the other unable to look away. The master of the court spoke first in a sharp voice that echoed through the hall. Human translator, Ethan Cole of Earth. You stand before Queen Zyra, ruler of the Velkar Dominion, speaker of the old blood keeper of the Eternal Gate. Ethan bowed with care. He had practiced the motion many times during the trip, but now it felt weak and foolish under the weight of so many watching eyes. Queen Zyra said nothing. At first she only looked at him. That look felt wrong, not cruel, not angry, not even cold. It felt deep, as if she were looking through skin, through bone, through memory itself. Ethan tried to focus on his job. He delivered the prepared words from the human fleet, offering renewed talks, trade access, border peace, and prisoner return. He spoke clearly and calmly, though his heartbeat grew louder with every sentence. When he finished, silence returned. Still, the Queen did not answer. She rose from the throne and began walking toward him. Every step was slow and graceful. The nobles lowered their heads as she passed them. The guards near Ethan stiffened but did not move. She stopped only a few feet away. Up close, she was even more striking, and yet something felt off, something tiny and hard to explain, like a perfect painting with one wrong shadow. You speak well, human, she said at last. Her voice was smooth and quiet and somehow reached every corner of the room. Ethan swallowed and nodded. Thank you, Your Majesty. Her eyes stayed on him, and for some reason that made him nervous in a way. Battle never had she circled him once. Slowly, like she was studying a rare animal, the room remained silent. Ethan knew he should say nothing more. He knew one wrong word in a place like this could mean death. But the pressure of the room, the strange beauty of the Queen, and the unbearable tension made him speak before he could stop himself. Your Majesty, he said softly, your beauty is unlike anything I have ever seen. The effect was immediate. 100 sharp sounds filled the hall as weapons were lifted around him. Several nobles gasped. One guard stepped forward. Ethan froze. He realized at once that he had broken some rule, one so serious that even the air in the chamber felt ready to shatter. But Queen Zyra raised one finger and every weapon stopped. Then slowly, very slowly, she smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was not pleased. It was something else. Something that made the back of Ethan's neck grow cold. She leaned closer, and her silver eyes seemed to brighten. Look closer. Human, she whispered. Ethan frowned without meaning to her skin. Near her throat moved not like skin should move. It shifted in a smooth wave, as if something beneath it had turned over in sleep. He stared, her smile widened. Another ripple moved under her cheek, then vanished. For half a second, one of her eyes became too dark, too deep, almost like a hole in space itself. Ethan stepped back. The nobles did not react in surprise. They reacted in fear, not fear, for the queen, fear of her Queen Zyra. Straightened, and her voice came again, calm as ever. "Do you still find me beautiful?" Ethan could not answer. His chest tightened. Every instinct in him screamed that something terrible stood before him, wearing beauty like borrowed light. The queen turned away from him and walked back toward the throne. "Escort the human to the inner chambers," she said. "He will dine with me tonight." A fresh wave of whispers spread through the court. One noble nearly dropped to his knees. The guards took Ethan by the arms more gently than before, but with no room for refusal. As they led him away, Ethan looked back. Once Queen Zyra had reached the throne again, and for just 1 second, while the blue fire flickered, he saw her shadow on the wall behind her. It was not the shadow of a woman. It was vast, crooked, and filled with too many moving shapes. Then the fire shifted, and the shadow was normal again. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He had come to talk peace with a queen, but deep inside he now knew the truth. Something terrifying was hiding behind that smile. And before the night was over, he feared he would learn exactly what it was. The inner chambers of the palace were even quieter than the throne room. Ethan was led through a maze of curved halls lit by pale floating lamps, and every surface seemed alive in some small way. Walls breathed with faint light, floors warmed under his feet, and doors opened only after a guard touched them and whispered words in a language older than the Velkar Empire itself. At last the guards brought him into a circular chamber with a high ceiling painted like a night sky. There was a table set for two in the center, and a narrow window that looked out over the endless storm below the palace. One guard pointed to a dark blue robe folded on the bed. "You will wear this at dinner," he said. His voice was rough and low, the first voice Ethan had heard from any guard since entering the palace. Ethan looked at him. "Am I a guest or a prisoner?" The guard gave no answer. Both guards left, and the door closed behind them with a soft hiss. Ethan stood alone. For several seconds he did nothing. Then he moved quickly across the room, checking for exits, hidden cameras, or anything that might help him understand where he was. There was only one visible door, and the window was made of some clear crystal harder than steel. He sat on the edge of the bed and replayed the throne room in his mind. The queen's skin had moved, her eye had changed, and that shadow. He had seen enough strange things in the galaxy to know when fear was wise, and everything in him said Queen Zyra was not simply an alien ruler with strange customs. She was something else. A knock came at the door before he could think further. "Come in," he called. A young servant entered carrying a tray of steaming food and a silver cup. She kept her eyes down as she crossed the room and placed the tray on the table. "Wait," Ethan said. She flinched so hard that he almost apologized at once. "I only want to ask a question." The servant remained still. "What happens to people who dine with the queen?" Her hands trembled. "No one speaks of it," she whispered. "Why?" "Because those who leave are changed, and those who do not leave are never named again." Before Ethan could ask more, she hurried out, and the door sealed shut once more. Ethan stared after her, changed. The words stayed with him. He forced himself to eat a little. Though his appetite was gone, the food tasted rich and sharp. Unlike anything from Earth, and the silver drink left a cold trail in his throat. Time passed slowly. At last the door opened again, and the same guards returned. They waited while he put on the dark blue robe, then led him deeper into the palace. This time, the halls were narrower and darker. The lights were fewer. The air felt cooler. Ethan noticed strange symbols carved into the walls, circles inside broken lines, shapes that seemed to twist when he looked too long. They reached a set of black doors, smaller than those of the throne room, but far heavier. One guard opened them and stepped aside. Inside was a private dining chamber. Queen Zyra stood beside the table. There were no nobles, no servants, no musicians, no guards. Once the doors closed, only Ethan and the queen remained. The silence felt alive. "You came," she said. "I did not think refusal was allowed," Ethan replied. For the first time, her lips curved in what might have been real amusement. "Smart." She motioned for him to sit. The table held dishes that smelled of spice smoke, and something sweet candles floated above them in a slow circle, casting warm light across the room. Yet the warmth did not reach Ethan. He sat carefully. The queen took the seat across from him. "Eat," she said. He obeyed because he saw no better choice for a while. Neither spoke. The queen watched him in a calm, unreadable way, and Ethan fought to keep his face neutral, though his mind kept returning to the moment in the throne room. At last he said what had been burning inside him. "What are you?" The queen did not seem offended. Instead, she picked up a thin glass cup and turned it slowly in her hand. "A ruler," she said. "That is not what I asked." "No," she said quietly. "It is not." She set the cup down and leaned back. "Most beings see only what lets them sleep at night. Human, they need shapes. They understand titles. They understand faces they can survive looking at, and your face helps them survive. Yes, what is the real one?" The candlelight dimmed, though no wind touched the room. Queen Zyra studied him for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice seemed deeper, almost layered, as if another voice moved beneath it. "My real form is truth, without mercy." Ethan felt his hands tighten under the table. "That means nothing. It means your mind would rather call me monster than understand what I am. Then help me understand." She smiled again, but this smile carried sadness under its edge. Few asked that after seeing even a glimpse. She rose from her chair and moved to the far side of the room, where a tall mirror of black glass stood between two pillars. "Watch carefully," human. Before he could answer, she placed a hand on the mirror. The surface rippled light bent around her body, and then the beauty cracked, not broken, not torn, but peeled away like mist lifting from deep water. Ethan saw silver skin become a field of moving darkness, threaded with pale fire. He saw the outline of her body expand and thin and split into shapes that should not exist in the same space at once. Her arms became long, drifting shadows filled with stars. Her face opened into layers of light and void, and behind it all, countless eyes flickered in patterns too fast to follow. His chair scraped the floor. As he stumbled back, his heart slammed against his ribs. His mind screamed that this could not be real. Yet it was. The thing before him was enormous, older than flesh, older than kings, wearing the memory of a woman like a mask. Then, just as quickly, the shape folded inward, and Queen Zyra stood there again, beautiful, calm, perfect. Ethan could barely breathe now. "You have looked closer," she said. He stared at her in horror. "What are you doing here, in this palace, in this empire, ruling it?" "No," he said more sharply than he intended. "Why?" Her expression changed. For the first time it hardened. "Because once long ago, my kind revealed themselves honestly, and the galaxy answered with fire." Ethan said nothing. "So I learned," she continued, soft again. "I learned that duty calms fear, and fear creates obedience, and obedience creates peace." Ethan repeated. "People disappear in your palace." Her eyes held his. Yes. The simple answer frightened him more than denial would have. Why? Because some cannot bear the truth once they see it, and some wish to use it, and those are the most dangerous of all. Ethan stood there, unable to move. The queen returned to the table and sat down as if discussing whether. "You are different," she said. "You felt terror, but you remained. Most minds break at the first edge of what I am. Yours bent and held." Ethan swallowed hard. "What does that mean for me?" "It means," she said, "that tonight you choose what?" She pointed to the chair across from her. "Sit and hear my offer, or leave this room, and become another silence inside these walls." Ethan looked at the door, then back at the queen. Every part of him wanted to run, but he knew the truth. Even if the door opened, there would be no escape from a being like her. Slowly he sat. "Good," the queen said, "because what hides behind my smile is not the only terrifying thing in this palace. And if you are to survive, you must hear the rest, queen." Zyra did not speak for several seconds after Ethan sat again. The silence pressed against him like deep water. The candles drifted above the table in slow circles, and their light reflected in her silver eyes, making them look almost gentle. But Ethan now knew gentleness had nothing to do with what sat across from him. At last she placed both hands on the table and said, "Your people think danger comes in ships and armies and weapons, but the oldest dangers do not march, they wait." Ethan listened, though every muscle in his body stayed tight. "What are you talking about?" he asked. The queen looked toward the black mirror. My kind are called the Morikai by those few civilizations old enough to remember us. We were not born on one world, and we do not live as lesser species do. We pass through space differently. We wear matter only when we must, and wherever we are seen without warning, fear follows. You are saying your whole species is like you, like me, she said, but not the same. And where are they? Now gone. The answer came with a strange emptiness, hidden, sleeping, or dead. I no longer know, Ethno. Ethanim frowned. Then how are you here? Because I stayed. That was the first moment he heard something truly human in her voice. Not weakness, but memory. Long ago, she said, my kind entered this region of the galaxy openly. We wanted exchange, knowledge, trade, but lesser minds saw our true shapes and called us demons. Empires united against us. Whole systems burned, and in the end, my kind fled into the dark between stars. You remained to rule the people who feared you. I remained, she corrected, to prevent something worse. Ethan said nothing. Queen Zyra continued. Beneath this palace lies a gate older than my empire, older than your Earth, older than most suns in your charts. It is not a gate of metal, but of space itself. A wound, a passage, and beyond it, there are things even my kind feared. Ethan felt cold spread through him. What kind of things? Hungry things the words were. Quiet, but they landed like stones for a moment. The storm outside flashed through the tall window and lit the chamber in white. Ethan remembered the title spoken in the throne room, Keeper of the Eternal Gate. It had not been ceremony. It had been warning you, guard that gate. He said yes. Why, with an empire? Why, with lies and fear? Because power is needed and order is needed, and beauty is easier for the weak to obey than truth. Ethan hated. How calm she sounded, saying that people are vanishing because of the gate. Aren't they? The queen's gaze sharpened. Some are taken because they seek what lies below. Some are taken because they hear it calling, and some are taken because I need minds strong enough to help me hold it shut. Help you? She nodded once. Now we arrive at the offer. Ethan almost laughed from stress. You think I want any offer from you? I think you want to live, she said. And I think your species has the stubborn courage to stand in front of terror. Longer than most, that was true, and he knew it. Humans did foolish things all the time, but they also stood their ground when wiser beings ran. This had won them allies, respect, and enemies in equal measure across the galaxy. What exactly do you want from me? He asked. You will come below the palace tomorrow and see the gate. If you remain yourself, after that you will help me understand why the voice beneath it has started speaking. Human words. Ethan stared. Human words. Yes, that changed everything. Up to this point, the Queen's secrets were her empire's problem and perhaps a threat to nearby systems. But if the thing below the palace had begun speaking in human language, then Earth had become part of the danger. What has it said for the first time? Queen Zyra looked disturbed. Your names, she said. Your cities, and once 3 nights ago it spoke one sentence clearly. What sentence? She held his gaze. Send the human down and the door will open. Ethan felt a pulse of fear so strong it almost made him dizzy. Why me? I do not know. That answer bothered him more than anything else because it sounded honest. Before he could speak, a deep sound rolled through the room. Not thunder. Something lower, something beneath the floor. The cups on the table trembled. The candles flickered and went out. For 1 second, there was total darkness. Then pale emergency lights appeared along the walls. Queen Zyra rose instantly. It has never done that. During waking hours, she said. Another vibration moved under the room, this one stronger. A distant alarm began to ring through the palace. Ethan stood. What is happening? Someone is below where they should not be. The doors burst open and 2 guards rushed in, dropping to one knee. Your Majesty. One said, breathless. The lower seal has been breached. Chamber 9 is open. The Queen's face changed from calm to dangerous in an instant. Who entered? Lord Varrock and his bloodguard. Ethan remembered the name Varrock. A powerful noble from the frontier worlds, a rival rumored to hate the Queen and fear her growing interest in peace with humanity. Queen Zyra moved past the guards like dark water. Seal the upper halls, she ordered. No one leaves the palace. She stopped and looked at Ethan. Come with me. Am I supposed to have a choice? He asked. Not anymore. The next few minutes passed in a blur. Ethan followed the Queen and a squad of guards through descending corridors hidden behind moving walls. The deeper they went, the older the palace became. Polished silver gave way to black stone and ancient carvings. The air grew colder and filled with a faint humming sound, like a giant machine breathing in its sleep. Finally, they reached a wide staircase leading into darkness. Below, the humming became a voice at first. Ethan thought it was imagination, but then he heard it clearly, soft, stretched, and wrong human. Every guard froze. Ethan's blood turned to ice. The voice came again from below, Ethan Colau. How did it know his full name? Queen Zyra glanced back at him, her perfect mask nearly broken by tension. Do not answer it. Another flash of red light filled the stairwell, and screams echoed up from the darkness beneath. Lord Varrock had opened something he was never meant to touch. The queen drew a long blade of shining black metal from within her robe. Stay behind me. Human Ethan looked down into the stairwell where red mist rose slowly, like smoke from a wound in the world. The voice whispered again, now sounding almost amused. Look closer. Ethan's heart stopped for a beat. Those were the exact words the queen had spoken in the throne room. He turned to her in shock, but she was already moving down the stairs toward the screams, and with no better choice, Ethan followed the terrifying queen into the dark beneath her palace, where something ancient had started calling his name. The stairwell twisted deep below the palace, in tight circles. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, until Ethan could see his own breath and smell metal and ash in every breath. He took the guards around him were trained soldiers, yet even they moved with the careful steps of people entering a nightmare they already knew too well. Red light pulsed from below like the slow beat of a giant heart. Screams echoed once more, then stopped so suddenly that the silence after them felt even worse. Queen Zyra reached the bottom first and raised one hand, signaling the guards to spread out. Ethan stepped off the last stair and found himself in a massive underground chamber carved from black stone, older than any part of the palace. Above, strange symbols covered the walls and floor, forming rings around a circular pit. In the center of the room, suspended above that pit, was a field of broken light, like shattered glass hanging in the air, and inside that light, something moved. Ethan could not fully see it. His eyes slid away whenever he tried. The pit was the gate. Around it lay the bodies of Lord Varrock's blood. Guard none looked wounded. Their armor was whole, their flesh untouched, but their faces were frozen in such terrible fear that Ethan had to look away. Lord Varrock himself was still alive. He knelt at the edge of the pit, trembling, his mouth hanging open, his eyes fixed on the broken light above the darkness. Below, one hand was pressed to a stone control altar beside him. The seal was open, just a little, but enough. Queen Zyra moved toward him with deadly calm. What have you done? Varrock the noble turned slowly, his face wet with tears. It promised me power, he whispered. It said it would make me free of you. The queen's expression did not change. Instead, she asked, how much did you hear? Everything, he said, and then he began to laugh weakly and hopelessly. It knows all your secrets, Queen. It knows what you really are and what waits beneath, and now it knows the human too. Before anyone could move, Varrock's laughter broke into a scream. His body jerked upward as if hooks had caught him. From inside his armor, cracked black light poured from his mouth and eyes. Then he was pulled into the pit without a sound. Ethan stumbled back in horror. The guards raised weapons. The broken light above the gate widened by only a few inches, yet the whole chamber shook. Queen Zyra turned to her soldiers. Hold the outer ring, no matter what you hear, no matter what shape you see. Do not break formation. They obeyed at once, spreading around the carved rings with disciplined speed. Ethan could hear fear in their breathing, even if none spoke. The voice rose from the gate again this time. It sounded almost human. Ethan Cole. It said, come forward, no queen. Zyra's answer cut across the chamber like steel. She stepped onto the inner ring of symbols, and her body began to change, not fully, not as before in the dining chamber, but enough for Ethan to see pale fire move beneath her skin and shadows lengthen around her feet like living things. The thing in the gate laughed. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere. At once, little jailer, it said, you cannot hold forever. Queen Zyra lifted her black blade and spoke in a language Ethan did not know. Each word made the carved symbols glow brighter, and the broken light above the pit tightened slightly. For a moment it seemed to work. Then the thing spoke again, but now in a new voice. Ethan's mother's voice. Ethan, His mother said soft and warm, from the dark, "Please help me." His whole body locked. That was impossible. His mother had died 8 years ago on Mars Colony 7 during the tunnel collapse. Everyone knew it yet. The voice was exact. Every breath, every softness, every little pause, "Please." "Ethan," she said, "I am cold." He took one step forward before he realized it. Queen Zyra shouted, "Do not listen." The voice changed again, now becoming the sound of a frightened child, then a wounded soldier, then one of Ethan's academy friends lost in a pirate ambush. Years earlier, each voice called him, begged him, tempted him. It was pulling memories from his mind. Ethan forced himself to stop moving. He clenched his fists so hard his nails cut into his palms. The queen had been right. The thing below the gate was not only hungry, it was clever. One guard screamed suddenly on the far side of the chamber. Ethan looked and saw the soldier staring at empty air before him, as if someone invisible stood there. His weapon dropped from numb fingers, and he stepped out of formation. "No, Queen Zyra," cried too late. A black thread of light lashed up from the pit and struck the guard in the chest. He did not even have time to yell. His body folded inward and vanished into a swirl of ash. The ring broke for 1 second. That was enough. The gap in the broken light widened again, and this time something pushed through. Not a full body, not even a limb exactly, but a shape made of darkness and red stars, like a hand. Trying to remember what hands were, the chamber temperature dropped so fast. Frost spread across the floor. The remaining guards nearly panicked, but Queen Zyra moved faster than Ethan thought possible. Her beautiful form dissolved into vast ribbons of shadow and silver fire, and she slammed into the emerging shape with such force that the entire chamber thundered. For one blinding moment, Ethan saw more of her real nature than ever before. She was enormous, not in size alone, but in presence. Her true form stretched beyond ordinary shape, a living storm of void and light, eyes opening and closing inside layers of darkness, arms becoming wings, then claws, then streams of burning symbols. She wrapped herself around the thing emerging from the gate and forced it backward. Every guard fell to one knee under the pressure of what they were seeing. Ethan nearly did too, but he stayed standing. Terror hammered through him, but some hard human part inside refused to bend. The queen looked at him through one flashing silver eye within the storm of her true form. "The altar," she said. "Seal it." Ethan snapped toward the stone altar beside the pit. It was covered in ancient markings in 3 deep, hand-shaped spaces arranged in a circle. "I don't know how," he shouted back. "Use your blood." He did not stop to question her. He pulled the combat knife from a fallen guard, sliced his palm, and slammed his hand onto the first space. The stone lit red. The voice from the gate screamed, "Human." It hissed no. Ethan moved to the second space and pressed harder, ignoring the pain. More symbols awakened, and the broken light above the pit narrowed. But the thing from below lashed upward again, striking Queen Zyra and throwing part of her shifting form against a pillar. She recovered at once. Yet Ethan saw weakness now flickers. Instability. She could not hold it much longer. He reached for the third space the moment his bloody hand touched it. The chamber exploded with images. Earth burning, human ships, broken cities, drowned in dark light. And standing above all of it, a vast open gate, with countless things pouring through. He almost lost himself in the vision. Then he remembered who he was. Human, stubborn, too angry to surrender. With a shout, he pressed his hand down fully. The altar flared white. The carved rings ignited in lines of fire. The broken light collapsed inward like a closing wound, and the thing from beyond gave one last roar that shook dust from the ceiling before being dragged back into darkness. Then everything stopped. The red light vanished. The frost cracked. The chamber went still. Ethan fell to his knees, gasping. Queen Zyra stood near the pit once more in her beautiful false form. Though cracks of silver fire still moved under her skin, she looked weak for the first time since he had met her. The remaining guards stared at Ethan with something close to awe. He looked at his bleeding hand, then at the sealed gate. "Is it over?" he asked. Queen Zyra walked to him slowly. "For tonight," she said. Then she looked into his eyes with a seriousness deeper than fear. "Now do you understand why I hide what I am?" Ethan breathed hard and nodded once. Yes, but he was beginning to understand something else too. The terrifying thing behind her smile was not the only monster in the dark. She had been holding the worst one back all along. After the gate was sealed, the palace did not return to normal. Alarms still echoed to the upper halls, and soldiers rushed through every corridor as if war had entered the heart of the empire in a way it had. Lord Varrock was dead, half his blood guard had vanished, and those who survived were being hunted because no one knew who had helped him open Chamber 9. Ethan was taken not to his guest room, but to a guarded chamber near the lower levels. One wall was transparent crystal, and beyond it, he could see engineers, priests, and armored officers moving around the ancient gate chamber below like ants around a cracked machine. His hand had been wrapped in silver cloth that numbed the pain but did not remove it. Queen Zyra entered an hour later with no guards behind her. She looked calm again, but now Ethan knew how much effort that calm required. "You sealed the third lock," she said. "No human has ever touched the altar and remained alive." Ethan gave a tired laugh. Good to know after the fact. She ignored the joke and stepped to the crystal wall, looking down at the gate chamber. "It responded to your blood more strongly than any Velcar line. Why? I was hoping you would tell me." He stood from the chair and joined her at the wall. The workers below seemed tiny compared to the black circles carved into the floor. "If that thing wanted a human so badly," he said, "maybe it has something to do with Earth. Maybe old contact, maybe ancient ruins. Maybe our species carries something by accident or by design," Queen Zyra said. Ethan turned to her. "What is that supposed to mean?" Before she could answer, the chamber door opened, and one of her commanders entered, bowing low. "Your Majesty, the frontier fleet has broken formation. 3 noble houses are broadcasting that the Queen has lost control of the lower seal. They are calling for a change of rule." Zyra's expression went cold. "How many ships?" "At least 70 war vessels, and more joining each hour," Ethan muttered under his breath. "That was fast." "Fear spreads quickly," the Queen said, "and power hunters move faster than fear." The commander looked at Ethan only briefly before returning his eyes to the Queen. "There is more. The human fleet has received fragments of the breach signal. They are demanding contact with their translator and preparing to withdraw." Ethan cursed quietly. Now the crisis was no longer trapped inside the palace. Both empires were reacting, and if either side made the wrong move, the result could be war. "I need to speak to my people," he said at once. Queen Zyra said nothing. "If they pull back in panic, your nobles will see weakness," he continued. "And if your rebel houses attack while my fleet thinks I am dead or captured, then nobody will ask questions first. They will fire. Still silence." Ethan stepped closer. "You said you wanted my help. Then let me help." The Queen studied him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded once. "Very well." Within the hour, Ethan was standing inside a secure communication chamber facing a live channel to the human flagship. Admiral Soren Hall appeared on the screen, his face hard with worry and anger. "Cole," he said, "are you alive?" "For now," Ethan answered. The Admiral leaned forward. "We detected some kind of energy event, and then silence. What happened?" Ethan glanced toward Queen Zyra, who stood off-screen in the shadows. He chose his words carefully. "There was an internal attack inside the palace, Queen." Zyra stopped at the situation as unstable but not directed at humanity at this moment. "At this moment," Hall repeated sharply. "Ethan, what are you not saying?" "A lot," Ethan said, "but trust me on this. If your fleet moves now, the wrong people on both sides will turn fear into war. Hold position and open a direct emergency line with the Queen." "That is a dangerous request," the Admiral said. "I know." There was a long pause. Hall finally nodded. "Because it was you asking? I will hold for 1 hour, no more. Good." Ethan said. The screen went dark. Behind him, Queen Zyra stepped forward. "You trust him." "I trust humans to be stubborn." For at least 1 hour, a faint smile touched her face and vanished. "There is another matter," she said. "What matter?" She lifted a small black device from the table and activated it. A star map appeared between them, showing the Velcar capital nearby system, and then far beyond them, a faint glowing mark near the edge of map space. 3 days ago, she said, before Varrock opened the seal, one of my deep watch stations detected a signal from beyond the dead zone. Ethan frowned. Whose signal? Hers was the answer. "No ruler wants to hear." "The same pattern as the gate." Ethan stared at the map. "You're telling me there is another source like that thing out there?" "Not another source," she said quietly. A reply that changed the scale of everything. The gate was not just a prison. It was part of a conversation. Before Ethan could think further, The whole palace shook again, not from below this time. From above, the commander's voice burst through the room speaker. Your Majesty, rebel ships are entering capital orbit. They are firing on the outer defense ring. Queen Zyra closed her eyes once, then opened them. Tell the defense fleet to stand ready but hold main batteries. I will not burn my own capital to win a family quarrel. Ethan stared at her family quarrel. She looked at him. Most civil wars begin that way. Sirens rose across the palace outside the crystal windows of the upper towers. Lights flashed in the storm clouds as ships entered battle positions around the floating crown of the capital. Ethan's pulse quickened, but not from fear alone. He had come to negotiate peace, and somehow ended up in the center of a palace coup. An ancient cosmic prison and a possible first contact, older than recorded history. What do you need from me now? He asked. Queen Zyra faced the storm. Your species is good at impossible defenses. Sometimes, he said good, then she answered, because tonight we defend this palace from my enemies above, while hoping the enemy below does not wake again. She turned to him, and for once there was no distance in her voice, no queen speaking to a lesser being, only one warrior facing another stand, with me, human. Ethan looked out at the warships gathering in the clouds, and then down through the palace toward the sealed darkness. Beneath this was bigger than empires. Now he met her eyes and nodded. If humanity was going to be dragged into the dark, then it would not enter quietly. The battle for the palace began under a sky split by lightning and engine fire. From the highest defense tower, Ethan watched rebel ships break through the outer cloud layer in sharp black lines, their weapon lights flashing red against the storm. There were dozens of them, sleek, noble war vessels carrying the banners of houses that now believed Queen Zyra was weak, or cursed, or no longer worthy to rule. They had chosen the worst possible moment to rebel, or perhaps the perfect one. Queen Zyra stood beside the tactical table in armor for the first time since Ethan had met her. The dark metal curved close to her body, and thin lines of silver light ran through it like veins. She no longer looked only beautiful. Now she looked dangerous, in a way even her courtly robes had hidden. Reports came in, one after another. Outer shield ring failing, 3 dock towers hit rebels, demanding surrender. Lower seal stable, but fluctuating. That last one bothered Ethan most. It meant the thing below was still pushing. He worked beside Velkar officers translating fleet codes and building a temporary bridge between the human flagship and the Queen's defense network. Some officers resisted at first, but the moment human targeting systems began improving their shield patterns, objections faded. Admiral Hall's face appeared again on the tactical screen. We are still outside weapons range, he said, but I have 6 fast frigates ready to move if you authorize support. Queen Zyra looked at Ethan. He nodded. Let them in now before the rebels lock the upper lanes. The Queen gave the order moments later. 6 human frigates cut through the storm like silver spears and entered the battle on the side of the palace. That alone shocked the rebels enough to break their first attack formation. Ethan almost smiled. Humanity had a way of arriving loudly. The battle grew fierce. Velkar defense cannons lit the clouds with blue fire while human frigates danced through larger enemy ships, striking engines and weapon arrays instead of going for dramatic kills. Ethan knew that was wise. Disabling enemies lowered panic and gave rebel crews a chance to surrender. But panic spread anyway, because halfway through the battle, the lower seal shook again. Every light in the palace dimmed. A long sound rolled upward from the depths, like the groan of a planet opening. Several officers dropped their tools in fear. Queen Zyra did not even maintain upper defense. She said, if the gate opens, none of this will matter. She was right. A civil war could still leave survivors. An open gate would leave none. Ethan moved to her side. We need to go below. If I leave the tower, the defense may collapse, she answered. If you stay and the seal fails, then everything collapses. Their eyes met. She knew he was right. The Queen turned to her commander. You have control until I return. If the rebels breach the tower, burn the lift shafts and fall back to the throne hall at once. Your Majesty. Then she looked to Ethan. With me. They raced through emergency corridors with a squad of elite guards behind them. Explosions above shook dust from the ceiling, and somewhere far away, metal screened as part of the outer palace broke away into the storm. When they reached the lower chambers, the air was already wrong. Warmer now, Not colder and filled with whispers, the gate chamber was chaos. Workers lay unconscious around the edges. The carved rings blazed red. The broken light above the pit had reopened to a thin, burning line, and from that line came the same terrible voice. Human Queen Zyra stepped forward, drawing her black blade once more. "Hold it back," she ordered the guards. They formed a perimeter, though fear was plain on every face. Ethan ran to the altar and saw at once that the blood seal he had activated earlier was fading. The stone still glowed, but weakly, like an old ember. "It wants more," he said. The voice laughed. "Yes." Then the burning line above the pit widened, and from inside it came. Not images this time, but words clear and cold. "We remember your makers." Human Ethian froze. Makers. Queen Zyra heard it too. And for the first time, true shock crossed her face. That single moment of distraction almost cost everything. A spear of dark light burst from the gate and struck one guard full in the chest, throwing him across the chamber. Another guard dropped screaming as whispers invaded his mind. Formation broke. The queen changed at once into her true form, a storm of void and pale fire, and hurled herself against the widening breach. But Ethan could see she was weaker from the earlier ceiling and the battle above. She could not do it alone. He looked at the altar, then at his wrapped hand, then back at the gate. "We remember your makers." The words beat inside his skull. Some terrible thought formed in his mind. Maybe humanity was not chosen by chance. Maybe somewhere in forgotten time, Earth had touched this darkness before, and something of that contact still lived in human blood. There was no time to understand it, only time to act. Ethan tore away the silver bandage, reopened his wound with the knife, and placed both bloody hands on the altar. The chamber shook. The symbols flared far brighter than before. The voice from the gate changed from amusement to hunger. Yes, it whispered, "Open." But Ethan did not open. He pushed. He did not know how exactly, only that the altar responded to will as much as blood, and human will, once fixed, could be hard as iron. He thought of Earth, of Mars, tunnels, of ships crossing dark space, of ordinary humans walking into danger because someone had to. He thought of the queen holding back a nightmare, while her own people feared her more than the thing she fought, and he refused. "Not today," he growled through clenched teeth. The altar exploded with white light. All the carved rings answered together. Queen Zyra gave one last impossible cry in her true form and slammed the breach with every part of her being. The gate convulsed. The line of burning darkness folded inward. The voice screamed, not in pain but in rage. "This is delayed, not ended." Then the wound closed. Total silence followed. Ethan fell backward to the floor, barely conscious. For a long moment, no one moved. Then he heard footsteps. Queen Zyra, now once more wearing the shape of a woman, knelt beside him. Her hand touched his shoulder. Very lightly. "You held," she said. "So did you." He whispered back. Above them, distant explosions still shook the palace. "The war is not over." He said no. She replied, and rose to her feet. "But the greater danger sleeps again." They returned to the upper tower minutes later to find the battle turning. The rebel flagship had been disabled by combined human and loyalist fire, and several noble houses were already sending surrender codes. Once it became clear the queen still lived and the palace had not fallen, the rebellion began to break. By dawn, the storm was fading. Fires still burned in the clouds, but the capital stood. Later in the throne room, with rebel leaders in chains and human officers standing beside Vilcar commanders, Queen Zyra took her seat again upon the throne. Yet everything had changed. The nobles no longer looked at Ethan as just a human envoy. They looked at him as the man who had gone below and returned twice. The queen addressed the court in a voice that filled the great hall. "Fear has ruled this empire for too long," she said. "But fear alone cannot guard what lies beneath us, and it cannot guide what lies ahead. From this day forward, the Dominion and humanity will stand watch together." Shock spread across the chamber. Then slowly, one by one, the loyal houses bowed. Ethan stood near the throne, exhausted, aching, and still not fully understanding why the gate had wanted him or what it had meant by makers. But he knew this much. The smile of Queen Zyra had hidden something terrifying, not simply a monster, not simply a secret. It had hidden the burden of standing alone against a darkness no one else would face. Now she was no longer alone. As the first light of morning entered the high windows, the queen turned slightly toward Ethan. For most in the court, it looked like nothing more than a passing glance. But he heard her quiet words, "Look closer." human this time. He understood, and far beyond the capital, far beyond rebel fleets and storm clouds and frightened empires, something ancient in the dark between stars seemed to hear the change that had begun, and for the first time in ages it hesitated.